one of my favorite scenes in the entire show is this dance sequence.
It's awesome.
It's so good. And there was a behind the scenes, somebody was saying, like, I love dance scenes in movies. And so I wanted to have one. It's so good. And like, they're right. Like, dance scenes are often incredible. And the way these two characters interact with each other, like, you see so much character being built with like how like kind of stiff and like awkward Dunk is, and then he comes in and he is fucking Jack Sparrow meets Oscar Isaac meets Tyrion Lannister. And oh my god, just the force of nature he is on the dance floor. There's definitely some attraction, it seems like, between the two of them.
Sure. They're also having like this little battle, like they're kind of he's stepping on toes and they're kind of spinning around. I like the idea that like dance is kind of like great equalizer. Like everybody's a bit vulnerable. Everybody's like characteristics are being shown by like their movements.
It's a way to display confidence.
Welcome back, friends, to episode 373 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And this week we discuss Ira Parker's 2026 series, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Last week we were so excited to talk about Westeros, A Song of Ice and Fire, George R.R. Martin. It's been a while, and we are both admittedly massive fans of fantasy and specifically A Song of Ice and Fire. I highly recommend, if you haven't already, listener, check out last week's episode because I think it's going to be a great companion piece for this. We're now talking the show, which I had started, you had not. So I'm so excited to get your thoughts on this. I'll start out by saying this is fucking awesome. I had so much fun watching this show.
So if you want to hear our thoughts on like Game of Thrones as a franchise, like where we were headed into this show, that we talk about extensively at the start of the previous episode. But yes, man, I hadn't watched any of the show. So I was, completely ignorant. I'd seen a trailer, I think, and that was it. I had been hearing good things, but that was about it. Man, what a breath of fresh air I feel like this is right now for Game of Thrones in general, but just in particular the show. It felt different. It felt familiar yet different, right? Like, and that's such a fine line to walk. Like, it still felt like, yes, we're in Westeros. This is a familiar look to this world. There's a familiar feel to it, and yet this felt different than everything else we've gotten, than House of the Dragon, than Game of Thrones, and it was in subtle ways. It was in an attention to some fun, some whimsy, some crude but kind of endearing humor that would come up throughout, and yet you still put that next to an attention to some of the things that I think book readers have long loved, and I'm speaking as myself at least, have long loved about the series, that often it felt like we're only getting like partially explored in the adaptations. And that's this attention to the chivalry, the knights, the armor, the pageantry that Martin loves to write about. He's very meticulous in how he describes coats of arms, how he describes the way people behave, the way they ride, the way they, their sort of reputations build up around them. They're these like superstars of the medieval world. That is on full display here as we have this complete newcomer who's completely, a novice enter this world, and he doesn't know what he doesn't know. Such a enticing way to enter this world and this story. I absolutely love it, and I feel like, to me, this Ira Parker is the name of the showrunner.
Correct, yeah.
It really felt like someone who is approaching it as a genuine fan of the material, who knows the shadow of these other shows that are out there that you're going to have to operate under, and yet was willing to find a path that was going to feel unique and, win the hearts over of the viewers. And from everything I'm seeing, that's what this show's doing.
Well, yeah, and just in terms of our reactions too, like we said last week, I've read everything in this world that George has released at this point, and this particular story was something that I looked at very fondly, and I was excited to see adapted. Mm-hmm. But obviously, there's a taste in people's mouths for season 8 of Game of Thrones, many seasons of Game of Thrones,
7 and 8, maybe 6,
And then obviously House of the Dragon season 2 was a little more divisive than season 1.
Yeah.
And contending with all of that, and then also, like you said, finding a style, finding a voice, finding a way to have this feel distinctly its own, and play with that humor. Like, this is so much like a tone that I love. Like, this is so speaking to my sensibilities with like these comedic elements, and then still driving home all of the epic nature of what you want from Game of Thrones, from just incredibly humble beginnings. You know, it really is just this tourney that is like a slice of what life was like in Westeros, and yet, like, you know, it starts out, it seems like it's just going to be kind of a little romp, and then it has like larger implications, and
it becomes very epic, I would say, you know, by the end.
In terms of the filmmaking prowess too, of like playing in that space of like showing us this excellent choreography and just like incredible cinematography, and like these performers are perfectly cast in a lot of roles, and like all that stuff within this kind of ridiculous premise in a ways, or at least it wants you to believe it's a ridiculous premise early on. And I love it for all those reasons, and it's just being like having seen the whole season now, which we're not going to spoil until we get into the spoiler section.
We'll spoil them as we go to each episode, and we'll spoil that episode, but you'll have advance warning. Like, now we're talking about episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Seeing the full breadth of what they covered here, and kind of where they could be leading, and what they were able to accomplish, I'm just very impressed, very like excited by this. I feel you know, I've been ingesting like tons of like lore from a Song of Ice and Fire recently and stuff. I'm just like really getting back into it in a major way.
Alt-Shift-X is a channel where they really get into the lore and break down all the meanings, and like, oh, you see this one, you know, symbol, and that means this, and that connects to this other thing, and like, he's so good at that stuff. So I will highly recommend that channel if you want.
He's always been great too.
Like, he's been great, but
dating back to like the Game of Thrones days when the original series is coming out and everything. Yeah,
this is like one of those properties that makes me want to engage with it on that deep level. I know I've looked at his channel; he continues to release stuff for other properties, but like, this is the kind of thing where I'm like, really want it. So yeah, it was definitely, I watched one for every episode that's out yet. I think the sixth one isn't out yet, but been enjoying that. The other thing I've been watching is behind the scenes, these little documentaries that they put out on HBO, and that was going to point me into what my next point, that it really felt like there was an attention and a love for practical effects, a desire to use real horses, to use real performers, to have stunt actors when necessary, to use the real actors when you can, and to do everything for real. There's very few moments in this series that are, you know, clearly CGI, and they tend to use it more for atmospheric things. I know fog was added with it at one point. There's a part where an animal gets pierced, that they had to do that with CGI. So there's like moments, but like, even that was a real horse that was trained to fall down in a way. So like, it's so cool to see someone who cares about that, because we've seen fully CGI animals. You know, even like last week we talked about fully CGI wolves in Frankenstein and how they look kind of wonky, and like, it reminded me of, and we've talked about this a lot, the Lord of the Rings extended edition Blu-rays back in the day would come with these bonus features.
The appendices,
The appendices would have all these bonus features, and you said that this is one of the things that was like inspired you to want to become a filmmaker, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a lot of the behind the scenes of any film I could pick up, but specifically like the way that I so engaged with fantasy and Lord of the Rings, like with how epic that was, the 3 films and Peter Jackson. It's just, and then how much they captured for that behind the scenes. It's like pretty unprecedented for that film trilogy.
Yeah, and it's something that we haven't seen as much of, but I love that HBO is doing it here. The reason this reminded me so much of it was because the scope of this show is much smaller in many ways. This is a smaller story. It takes place largely in a single location. It's a big location, and we see different parts of it, but it's like this one tourney. And because of that, they are just able to like make it. They're like, we're going to make this tournament. We're going to have all the tents. We're going to make the stands. We're going to make the tilts. We're going to, you know, everything that they could make, they did. They built a bridge. Like, they did all kinds of crazy stuff in the behind the scenes. And then just the attention to all the details, like when they're in the tents, like all the things that they interact with, and he's walking around through the markets, like all the individual items on the tables, and like that attention to detail just reminded me so much of Lord of the Rings, and it's like this painstaking, loving thing. also the costuming and the way that every single knight, even knights, I was so amazed at the knights who you barely see and like don't have any lines are wearing absolutely stunning armor that is evoking some story about their house that is drawn from the books. And like, I think that stuff is so fucking cool. And I just love that they cared to do that. I think it comes across. And because of the kind of story this is, it enables them to do that. They don't have to worry about, we got, 30 other sets we have to worry about. We have all these other storylines we have to worry about. It's like, no, we can just focus on this and get it right. And they did.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just like this, and that attention to detail, it kind of like fractals out, right? Like it's like that attention to detail in costuming and set design, it goes into like motivations of character. It goes into like every aspect of filmmaking, like the specifics of how the camera may move or be set or the blocking of a scene. Like all of that is just goes to show that like this is the little brother scrappy sort of production versus House of the Dragon, which has the $20 million an episode budget, right? And so this they're working within constraints and limitations and like making the best of what they can.
For the record, I think House of the Dragon is a much harder show to make.
Absolutely, yeah.
Level of difficulty is insane. You're dealing with dragons, lots of them, and they don't exist. So you have to use CGI, you have to make parts of them, that's so hard. There's so many locations. So fully granted, House of the Dragon is a very difficult show to make. But like that's one of the strengths this show provides. So lean into it.
No question. This show kind of proves that like dragons weren't the magic of A Song of Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones in the first place.
Especially, I mean, like you barely get any of them in the first book anyway. Like it's at the very end and you didn't even know you were going to get them. You kind of expected you weren't. It's about the people. It's about the characters. The thing you do get is like some tilts, some stuff that happens at King's Landing. You get lots of knights. You get lots of descriptions of armor. You hear about all these different knights, and some of them are already dead. And you're hearing like tales of what they were like when they were still alive, and the rich lived-in world of Westeros, and like how much the past affects the current situation is so powerful. Like he does such a good job of like all the events that happened with Robert's Rebellion loom so large over this story. And yet we never actually see that. It's just like the effects of it are just felt everywhere.
Right. Well, in this story, it's the Blackfire Rebellion recently.
Well, and this predates Robert Rebellion. There's so many cool ways you could see the seeds getting laid. I mean, it's years before, but like you can see how the feelings about the Targaryens are starting to change. You see certain houses who are already starting to show a tendency to rebel. Things like that, which is so smart. Absolutely love that stuff, man, and I'm such a sucker for it, and like this made me excited to engage with it in a way again that I had cooled on a little bit, I think, for a while, but.
And I believe that like the payoff of what Game of Thrones built in A Song of Ice and Fire with the introduction of dragons and the usage of them and everything, like that's such a cool part of the story. Of course, I love that. But the point is taken, right? Is like it's not. We wouldn't care about the dragons if not for the greater world or some of these other inner workings. And this story is so expertly kind of operates in that space of like we care about. This is post dragons where we're at with the Hedge Knight and where we're at with Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. We're seeing how these events are so connected to the Targaryens, and they're so connected to basically everybody that we're going to come to love in A Song of Ice and Fire. And in just the ways that like this to me through character, which George is excellent at, and I think the show grasped onto very well, of like selling us on characters, exciting characters that we root for, characters that we hate, and like just selling all of that as this sort of smaller package, building to what I think are some of the most epic moments in any possible Game of Thrones story.
It's like epic in a sense, but also like it is smaller scale, but like it doesn't need to be big scale to be epic. Like, because I agree, it does feel incredibly epic.
Yeah, it's a gravity thing. It's like how important, how emotionally attached are you to these moments?
Yeah, very cool, man. You mentioned the casting. Absolutely. Shout out to both of our leads. Peter Claffey as Sir Duncan he's incredible. He plays kind of this bumbling oaf character who is a bit of a himbo, I guess. And yet he's so endearing. He reminds me a lot of a character. I don't think this is a spoiler to say, but I've seen people draw the lineage, and apparently he is a distant ancestor of Brienne of Tarth. Did you know this?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he reminds me a little bit of Brienne.
That.
Yeah.
Yeah, George has come out and said that as well.
Yeah, and just in the sense that like he cares so much about knighthood and the ideals of it and what he believes it to be. And then also just his like sort of massive presence. Yeah, I think he's really, really good, really well cast.
And I also heard that he's like a former professional rugby player or something. Like that's,
yeah.
And he's got the size for it. He pulls it off very well. He pulls this role off very well. From those behind the scenes sort of things that they're doing after the episodes, I think that he really understands the character based on these interviews and stuff, and obviously working with the filmmakers. Very impressive to me as being able to pull off Duncan, especially if like acting wasn't his sort of first profession, and then now he's come into that.
Nailing it,
and then just to talk about like first profession too, Dexter Solancel plays Egg. This child is probably around 9, 10, 11 years old.
Yeah, I think he was 10 at time of shooting or something like that is what I heard.
Yeah. And the character in the story is supposed to be 9 years old, and this is the most adorable, lovable child actor I've seen in a long time. I was so sold on this character, and just the actor. I've been so enthralled with the series that I've been like all the behind the scenes interviews I could find, any sort of like promotional stuff on. I'm watching all that stuff, and he's just like the coolest little kid, and like his relationship with Peter Claffey, and
he's so like genuine and earnest, and it comes across in his character. I agree. He is better than I would have thought they could do. And man, like between this and Hamnet, like we have seen some incredible child performances lately. Because I agree. I think he is a star in the making. I think they knocked it out of the park with this one. He so perfectly plays his character, because there's a lot that character has to pull off. Without spoiling anything, there's a lot of complexity to the character. And I was very dubious. I was very skeptical they were going to be able to find somebody to really do this. And it was so important for the story to work that they do. And man, did they do it. He's fantastic. There's some behind the scenes parts where he was talking about his genuine excitement to like show off and to show that he could do something, and to like, it was like a sense of play that he like genuinely felt in the moment in the scene. We'll talk about it when we get there, but like that comes across on camera, and you feel it in the character, and you're feeling it in the character because the actor's feeling it for real. And just what a blast this would have been. Unbelievable thing to shoot.
By all reports, like the cast and crew and everybody seemed like they just loved each other and had the best time creating the show. And again, like it feels like HBO is so much more focused on like a House of the Dragon, that this can kind of flourish in that sort of artistic sense where like the creatives get to play. And
tell you what, man, this show is done so well. I think there's gonna be a little more focus on it now.
I'm sure there will be. Yeah.
I am gonna read the next 2 novellas, I think, for this
one.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Have you read them already?
I have, yeah.
Okay, see, I haven't read them, but I think it can inform our coverage in a way that won't be negative. And just the main thing is I'm so interested. And I want to find out what happens next for these characters, that I want to chase that feeling. It's like I want to follow this path to reading something for just the pure enjoyment of it. And I'm just so drawn to the story right now that I think I'm going to just start reading this basically as soon as we finish recording. Because I was waiting. I was like, I don't want to go into this recording with any future knowledge for what happens is going to happen next season. But man, I'm so interested to read the next book.
That'll be cool, yeah. And you'll be fresher on it as well. So like I won't reread till
I'll reread it whenever we cover it. So then I'll just be able to like be even deeper in it.
I mean, I totally understand that instinct, and like I feel the same way. Like I'm so excited for more episodes of the show. Yeah. I love that like we're getting more of this. My only, the only hang up that I think we should talk about, George has only written 3 of these. He had like 9 to 10 in mind.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit last week. How many he's has pieces of and plots for, but he hasn't actually written. Yeah. So like, how long can this show actually go based on what has currently been released? Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe 3 seasons.
The rest of the cast, we can talk about them individually, but I think everybody is excellent.
Oh man, Daniel Ings as Sir Lionel the Laughing Storm.
Yep. Excellently casted.
Excellent.
He's super charismatic. Amazing performance throughout.
So watching that, he's in the first episode. My wife, Annalisa, was watching. She's like, he reminds me so much of Peter Dinklage. And I was like looking at his face. I'm like, I totally see it. Like Peter Dinklage, and like he has a lot of the charisma of Peter Dinklage. I was like, but it's mixed with somebody else. And I was like, I think it's mixed with Oscar Isaac. And she was like, yes. And so that was what we came on. Is he's a mix of Peter Dinklage and Oscar Isaac and a performer, which is pretty incredible praise. And then I saw the behind the scenes, and I heard him talk about how he was wanting to harness like a Jack Sparrow type energy for the character too. Totally. And so it's like you're getting all those things mixed together, and it's just a super charismatic, compelling character to watch on screen.
Plus, just like excellent material in the first place. Just like just really like a Baratheon at heart all the way through, and just like such a fun character to watch. I gotta specifically talk about the Targaryens now, like to talk about Bertie Carvel as Baelor and Sam Spruill as Maekar. Specifically Baelor, like perfectly fit the sort of like kingly energy. Obviously he's the hand of the king in this scenario, but like he's so likable even as a Targaryen, you know, even as we're with the Baratheons and we're like, yeah, kind of fuck the Targaryens, right? For just like kind of ruling with an iron fist for all these generations.
It's so funny because like there's so many Targaryens we hate, but there's also many Targaryens we love, and he's done such a good job with that.
Baelor is the one that we love for sure, and Maekar is, you know, conflicted character. Is this performer so expertly walks that tightrope of being like kind of an asshole and then like, you know, pitiable in some senses.
Well, speaking of ones we dislike, Aerion Targaryen here, the Bright Flame Targaryen, Finn Bennett plays him. I think he's incredible here, actually. And this is kind of I didn't realize this, but he's a very intriguing character in this sort of mythos, right? And people have have done a lot of like fan art of him, and like the descriptions of him were always very intriguing and sort of vivid. And so it was, like a sneaky big role to have to come in and fill. And I think he does a fantastic job. I think this is another just spot on casting. And I actually think he brings something to this character that wasn't in the novella that I really liked. We can return to that here in a little bit. But maybe I want to talk about something that I think maybe can serve us as a transition into talking about more behind the scenes stuff, because I know you have some details there. But I felt like this show, at least from the top down, specifically like Ira Parker and some of the other people, and I don't know all their names, so it was people who were often being interviewed in these behind the scenes.
Yeah, many times it was the directors, which we'll talk about.
Yeah. And yes, it's not everybody, but it felt to me like there was this youth movement. This felt like this is a show run by people who are around our age, like millennials are at the helm of this show. And that feels different to me than what I've seen elsewhere, where it was more like Gen X or older. And like, I don't know, it felt like there's something about that youth movement that brought something fresh here too. And I was noticing at how young a lot of the people they were interacting with. I'm like, oh man, that guy is doing this big part. Like, he looks like he's 30. I kept having that reaction and just thinking like, well, Ira Parker is young. I think he's like 41. And I'm like, if you're that age, you're going to be much more open to hiring younger people that you've worked with and that you know maybe came up with. And I don't know, it just reminds me of stuff that we see in the NFL, which I won't get too far into, but basically I follow the Jaguars. They had a complete youth movement, and it's really helped, I think, the franchise, and you see it trickle down from the top when you have young people in charge. They hire a bunch of young people, and everything feels kind of fresh. We need that in the government in this country. Anyway, another side note, but I love to see it in this show.
If we're going to mention the NFL as a Bucs fan, I just have to say, you could say that they're maybe a little youngry, which to quote a...
I don't think I've ever heard that term, youngry.
You haven't? Oh my God.
No, man. Yeah, I guess Classic. We got a youngry show here.
Circa like, I don't know, 2010 or 2011, 2012, somewhere in that era. Raheem Morris was our head coach, and he was a young coach, young team all around him, and he coined like youngry. So anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, it's like you get that energy from a lot of these younger creatives, and you mentioned like Ira Parker. I don't know exactly how old he is, but he's definitely like of our.
So my wife looked it up because we were having this discussion about how young, and Annalisa looked it up, and she was like, I think he's 41. I was like, damn, that dude's my age. Like, I'm not 41 yet. I'm 40, but I'm like, he's basically my age.
Right. And like I saw him talking about like Game of Thrones came out when he was in school.
Yeah.
When he was still in college.
He probably had a similar fucking journey with it that I had.
And like he wanted to go into filmmaking, create films, but like then he said that he was like his life was changed by shows like Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, Mad Men. That whole era right there of that like golden age sort of leaned him into TV, and then he wanted to become a TV writer, and he got on some other shows and stuff, which we'll talk more about. But that's like totally I think you're picking up on what his journey has been, and what I was seeing in the show as well, is like, this is like, we get to be fans of these things, and then we get to influence them and create in these spaces. And it's just exciting to see like a bold, because this is kind of a bold take for a Game of Thrones show, with the tone and just the overall, like, the smaller scale of it, how approachable it can be in a sense.
We haven't said it yet, but incredibly faithful. He works really closely with George. From everything, he has a great relationship. He's super involved, and there's a respect and a love for the material that it's coming across, and he's working with the creator, and they're figuring out ways to expand on things that it just feels so smart and appropriate. It's like, we're not changing the major things that happen, but we're adding some more detail here. We're adding some more interactions of the characters here, because that's going to give a bigger payoff as we, go through the season. Because ultimately, even though they are shorter episodes, there's 6 sort of like 30 to 45 minute episodes. You add all those together, it still ends up being quite a bit more story than the novella had. Like, the novella is maybe enough for like a movie, like a short movie, and this is a little more than that. So you're going to have to flesh it out. And I just thought the things they chose to flesh out were so smart. It was like developing Dunk and Egg as a absolutely endearing relationship between these two guys, and just how powerful that is so effective. It's such an effective storytelling thing to do, because of what happens later in the show hits so much stronger when you've developed a deep care and you've seen on screen how they feel about each other. And you do similar things with like Lionel Baratheon, for example, who was like a favorite in the novella that we talked about. He was really cool, but a very small role by comparison to what we get here, where we really explore him more. We make him. We bring him front and center and make him like one of the next biggest characters outside of our main two. And he's, he gets the chance to be kind of the guy who steals scenes that he's in, because he's just so compelling to watch. I just loved all the ways in which we developed stuff, and then we'd get back to a scene that is right out of the book. And so often the lines are right out of the book. It was word for word, moment for moment. And I'm like, that whole entire scene was just the book brought to life. And it was so cool to occasionally see those moments as well.
Absolutely. And I think that like working closely with George is always going to be a key for that, which like, I know there's like an ego sort of sense to things. And I know that things like adaptation we talk about on this podcast all the time can be very transformative and still be very effective and work. With these shows, I've seen that like when they tend to deviate from George's work, I tend to like it less. And I'm not even being a book purist in that way. It's just looking at it like narratively and as a fan of just like the show in a vacuum. So like the idea of working so closely with George, I think that he just understands the material like no one else really can.
Yeah.
And keeping that relationship like front and center as something I've seen that's really cool that Ira Parker is doing. And like we've said, like it's kind of in a sense, it's an easier thing to pull off than like House of the Dragon, which is such a massive show with so many like insanely wildly moving parts.
There are things that happen in that book when you read them, you're like, they can't do this. They can do a piece of it. They're going to have to find a way to work around this. And then there's just, monetary restrictions and studios and all kinds of things. And, it's caused some rifts that we've dug into a little bit. One of the things that Martin is able to do, and I think what becomes important about keeping him so involved, is that every one of these stories is a piece of a larger canon that is massive and that holds together in a very particular way, because he has a very particular vision for what he wants this world to feel like, where he wants stories to go. And yes, it's unfinished. So part of the problem when you're doing Game of Thrones is you're running into the unknown. But like back here, it's not. So he knows kind of where all this stuff leads. And in order for it to lead to the same place, you kind of have to follow the same path. And yes, you can explore other things on the side, but like when you start making changes, that's where you get into trouble, where now you're going to try and force your way back onto path, and you've deviated so much that forcing back onto path is jarring rather than feeling natural. If that am I making sense with that? No,
yeah, and we saw some of this with like the Wheel of Time, for example, just as like with the show, like they made some questionable decisions early, tried to course correct, and it just took a long time to get it back. sort of back to where they wanted it to be. Just in talking about George, I feel like obviously it's loaded with him working on this show and the fact that people are so passionate about Winds of Winter. We did address a lot of that last episode, so if you're wondering our thoughts on that, check out that episode. Just to give a brief sort of look at it, we recently went to Worldcon. We interviewed Martha Wells there. It was a fantastic time. George R.R. Martin was there as well. This was when something kind of controversial came up, and a quote-unquote fan stood up and said basically like, since you're going to die soon, or since we know you're not going to finish the books, will you have someone else finish it? And just like that mentality around someone like this, we talked about last week, like someone who's created something that we love. As creatives, each of us have a lot of empathy towards that. And like he is working on this show, but I don't think that should be looked on as like a negative thing. Like it's like, of course he's still working on Winds of Winter. Of course he still wants it to come out.
I don't know how you can think that now. Like if you're a fan of this show, you have to recognize the fact that he took the time to do what he did and work closely with Ira Parker on the development of this show is one of the reasons why it is so good. You know what I mean? Like you don't be mad at him for it. Like you like the show, right? Like it's part of his world, and yes, it's not the thing that we're all waiting for, but we're Martin defenders, clearly. We get into our reasons why last week, so I will point you towards that discussion rather than rehash it all here.
That's basically just to say like why we're not touching on some of those like larger things that everybody's talking about, because we already talked about it. So let's talk about Ira Parker a little more. He worked as a staff writer on a TV show called Rogue in 2015, 4 in the Morning in 2016, The Last Ship from 2016 to 2018. He then worked as a writer, co-executive producer on Better Things from 2019 to 2020. He said that Better Things had some of the largest impact or lessons for him leading into this show, Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Specifically, I think like tonally and some of just like seeing how like a show is run in general. He was then a member of the writing staff for House of the Dragon for its first season.
Oh, interesting.
And then he kind of branched off from that to come over and work over here for A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Cool. And he wrote with George and with other writers, wrote like a lot of these scripts throughout. I want to talk, because we talked about Ryan Condal a little bit, I do want to say Ira Parker had a quote about his relationship with him, because obviously they worked together on House of the Dragon. Ira Parker said, "House of the Dragon was my entry into this world. Ryan Condal is the reason I have my current job. In a lot of ways, he's my Sir Arlen. I'm so grateful for him because he pulled me into Westeros and gave me these opportunities. His love for this world is infectious." So again,
that's awesome.
It's like it's a rocky sort of weird thing with him and George, with Ryan Condal and George, and I just wanted to address that, like, Ira Parker has, was able to create the show basically on the heels of like House of the Dragon. So I think all of this is to be taken in stride and just kind of thinking of it as like a large picture. We talked about how Ira Parker worked closely with George R.R. Martin developing this show, and something I learned from the article that we will talk about and just in my research is
Hollywood
that, like,
Reporter article, which we'll link in the show notes.
George R. R. Martin likes to bring the showrunners all together with like writing team, with like, again, I think it's like sort of a brainstorming sort of like
summit. He called it a writing summit or something. Yeah, like a week-long thing.
So you get like fantasy writers and TV writers and the showrunner and Martin himself, and everybody gets together in New Mexico, and they kind of bounce all these ideas off and build the show in essence. And I thought that was really cool. Ira Parker said that it was one of the most like rewarding experiences, like getting to spend that time with Martin and just bounce everything off of him and like kind of build out the world in this way and build to this show that we eventually got. Parker's also said that like Martin was pretty much always my first read on any script. He would send him scripts even before he sent them to HBO. We'd have great conversations. Quote, "I told him pretty early on that I wouldn't put anything in that he didn't want me to." So again, I think like very much respecting that sort of relationship with the material. And I honestly think we're seeing a lot of that in this first season. We mentioned the directors earlier, and I just wanted to talk about them individually. Owen Harris was hired to direct 3 episodes. I believe he directs like 1, 2, and 5. And Sarah Adina Smith directed the 3 other episodes. So
okay, so
what would that be?
2 people back and forth.
3, 4, and 6, I believe.
Okay, that's cool.
And those were the 2 of the people that you were seeing come on screen in those behind the scenes featurette kind of things at the end of each episode. So definitely worth shouting them out as well. I think they did a lot of excellent work.
Yeah, great job. It is interesting to note that Ira Parker, showrunner, but not directing these episodes.
Writer. Heavily involved, his vision for the most part, but the direction is like...
It's an interesting distinction, right? Because it's not clearly defined what the role of showrunner is, other than you are just kind of the CEO in charge of the entire thing, but like different showrunners do it differently, right? Like some of them, like someone like Vince Gilligan is definitely heavily involved in the writing. He does have a writer's room. And then heavily involved in the direction, but he does bring on guest directors for things. So it's an interesting thing where he's like doing a bit of both. I don't know. I'm just curious, I guess. I'm always curious like what that looks like. And I know there's been times where the showrunner directs everything, or the showrunner has one director who directs the entire season.
It's definitely an interesting distinction. I mean, oftentimes there's sort of a utility to it where it's like clearly it took 2 people to direct 6 episodes. So for one person to direct 6 episodes and just maintain all the continuity and write all the scripts, like that can tend to be a lot for one person.
Division of labor. You're working on a team anyway, so that can make sense. I wonder if it's like they're just kind of taking lead for those. I can also imagine there's different skill sets, right? Like if you know that somebody's really good at certain things, you have them do certain episodes.
What it comes down to is like some people are very skilled at like the writing, the vision in terms of like the plot and just like the goings on, and then some people are very visually minded. Sometimes you get both, you know. So I think that
was it. Sapochnik was a famous one who would often have a lot of the like biggest set pieces. He'd come in for those episodes of Game of Thrones.
But again, it is kind of like an amorphous kind of thing. Like it just changes between each production.
Yeah, there's a level of humility I think that often comes into play where it's like it's probably better if you recognize that your time is best spent elsewhere, and that maybe this thing that you know how you want it to look, but like you're not the one who's going to get it there. You need to bring someone in who you can trust to get it there, and who you believe can get it there. Because sometimes those people are better at it than you are. Like recognizing like they're going to do a better job of getting the thing that I want to look like how I want it to look, to be how I want it to be. It's interesting. It's an interesting role for sure.
So the development of this goes back as far as like 2013 when George R. R. Martin was talking about discussions about possible adaptation of the Dunk and Egg novellas. And it kind of seemed like it wasn't what HBO was interested in doing for a period of time. George R. R. Martin would continue to come out and talk about it over the years and say like ultimately like what he would like to see is like a 2-hour film for each novella. Like that was kind of his idea of what it could be. And it wasn't until 2021 that it was announced that they were actually working on prequel series for Game of Thrones. There was obviously like House of the Dragon was one of them. There was the famous one that was canceled now, I think, or maybe it's back on based on the article, the Jon Snow sort of sequel series.
I think that's basically dead because for one, Kit Harington said he doesn't want to touch Jon Snow again.
Yeah, but just in that article, they did say like, which as of like January, they said like there's a new writer that's kind of touching in on it. So it's possible it's still in partial development.
There's several other ones too that are, you know.
There's the Sea Snake one that's switched to animation now, which I think is probably getting pushed through. I would be excited to see that. House of the Dragon obviously was the one that succeeded. Now we have the Dunk and Egg stories, the Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and I think the other big one that they're working on is Aegon's Conquest. That would be, I think they said a film, possibly. But we'll see. I would be excited to see that as well. I mean, Aegon's Conquest is like legendary in the lore of all of this. So
they're knocking them out of the park so much that I'm excited for this stuff, even though I still have a sour taste in my mouth about, what happened. But like this stuff, it can be like somewhat untainted by that, right? Like it can kind of exist in a vacuum a little bit.
And I think that's how George feels about it as well. That's why he gets so excited about some of this. So, and like partially he said he needs to be working on Winds of Winter, but he has like obviously another Fire and Blood book that he'd like to work on, these other Dunk and Egg novellas. And that leads me into this, which I hinted at last week because I'd heard something about it, but I found more information on it. In January of 2026, Parker disclosed that Martin had provided him with outlines for 12 unpublished Dunk and Egg stories.
Whoa. According
to Parker, HBO intends to adapt only the first 3 novellas that have officially been published. Parker, however, and I heard him speak about this, envisions adapting all 12 stories, planning to release 4 initially, followed by 4 more a decade later, and then the final 4 10 years thereafter. So this is like a dream, I think, of his.
Yeah.
Of like this idea of like letting the characters age and then coming back and filming them again.
It must be that some of these stories are occurring later in their lives.
Right.
Yeah. So you let the actors age. That's kind of cool. Like you normally don't hear people say that they're going to do that. They just kind of leave it mysterious. But I love the idea of like
he's shooting a shot.
Yeah.
He's trying to see what he can get done here. Apparently, Martin has handed over manuscripts and this idea of these framework for some of these stories, and that article made it seem like, as much as I've heard he's not writing anything else until he's done with Winds, it sounded like he could be working on those novellas.
Yeah, in that article, he's like, I have all these ideas that I want to get down, but I know I need to write Winds of Winter. Yeah. I don't know. Like, part of me reads that and goes like, just to wins a winner, Martin. But then like now I love this so much. I'm like, yeah, it's okay. Take a break and write some of this. I love it too.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that's how a lot of people are feeling. It's very conflicting, and it's like, we just wish the best for him. Let's just like hope he's happy and that he can be creative and fulfilled and like gets all the stuff done and lives to be 150. So
yeah,
that we have all the time in the world.
Let's hope.
All right. Well, I think this is a good time to sort of jump into the plot. But before we do that, one thing that we'd like to impress on our listeners a little more is that we have a Patreon, patreon.com/ink2film. On there, we have bonus episodes. You can vote on polls that decide what we'll be covering in the main feed. And ultimately, right now, with the changing landscape of all these different subscriptions and things that we have to keep the show going, our costs have gone up, and we're kind of in a state where we're asking for new patrons. If you would like to support us, we would really appreciate that. And it would help the show continue to go. We can continue to improve.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of realize that we don't have advertisers right now. The main thing we have is Patreon, and we're not really talking about it till the very end of the episode. So I think some people are missing it. So we just wanted to say it up front here early. We do have it. We have bonus episodes on there. We just recorded one for season 2 of Fallout and released it. So if you want to hear our thoughts on that, that's the kind of thing we do, like video game adaptations, alternate adaptations, that kind of thing, other experiments on there. And then, there's the ability to vote on upcoming projects, which we'll be announcing a new one at the end of this episode that was voted on by the patrons. So once again, that's patreon.com/ink2film. We'd love to have your support, help us keep this show going. And it means a lot to us if you would consider doing that.
All right. So breaking into the plot itself now.
Episode
Spoilers abound, everyone. Per episode, we're going to try to stay as much as we can in that threshold. Anyway, spoilers if you haven't seen the show. Here we go. The first episode is called The Hedge Knight. Dunk buries his deceased mentor, Sir Arlen of Pennytree, and then heads to a tournament being held in Ashford. At an inn, a bald child that Dunk believes is the stable boy asks to be his squire for the tournament, but Dunk refuses. Dunk meets Ashford's steward and requests to enter the tournament by claiming that Arlen knighted him before dying. The steward says that someone must vouch for him. Dunk seeks out Sir Manfred Dondarian, whom Arlen served. Dunk meets Sir Stefan Fossaway and befriends his squire Raymond Fossaway before watching a puppet show featuring a fire-breathing dragon puppet performed by Tansel. Raymond takes Dunk to Sir Lionel Baratheon's tent. Dunk feasts with Lionel, who dismisses his tournament chances. Dunk finds Manfred, who refuses to vouch for him. Back at his campsite, Dunk re-encounters the bald child, who calls himself Egg. Dunk names himself Sir Duncan the Tall and makes Egg his squire. They see a shooting star, which Egg claimed will bring good luck.
Controversial moment happens early on in the sense that Martin, I think, has weighed in and said, I don't know if we need the shit scene. I don't know that we don't need it, though. I kind of get what he's saying.
I feel strongly
but
about it.
Yeah, I'm curious to know your thoughts on it. I think it sets a tone that the show continues to lean into, of having some of that crude humor to it that shows that it doesn't take itself too seriously in some ways.
And I would argue too that like this is showing you that this isn't the show of nobles, and maybe some of that sexiness that was in the original show is stripped away. Although I would claim there's plenty of sexiness in the show, but in general, this is saying like we're a different show immediately.
Yeah,
like,
it announces it being different because it undercuts the Game of Thrones theme song.
Yeah, immediately is saying like, hey, and I hope that I think that Ira Parker hopes this as well, is that people don't think that they're immediately shitting on the original Game of Thrones, saying fuck Game of Thrones or something. But what's happening is just like there's an attention to how messy life can be for the common folk of Westeros, and how like these kinds of things are normal human things that we all put up with. Dunk is clearly dealing with nervousness or something. That's what I take it as, right? Like he's like, oh shit, I'm on my own for the first time in a long time, and now I'm, deciding that I'm going to go enter a tourney as a knight. And like, he's like, there's this moment of him holding the sword, and it seems like this like epic beginning. And then it does do a sort of a subversion there. But I appreciate it for that. I think like that tone right away is saying to me, like, prepare to have fun.
Exactly, yeah. And then when he goes and he has this conversation with I forget what the name of the character, but he's the guy who's like deciding whether or not he can join the tournament, and he keeps doing this. The steward, he keeps doing that like throat clearing thing he's doing, where he's spitting, and like there's just like an element of like I called it whimsy earlier, but maybe that's not even the right word. It's almost just like absurdity that's going on, and like that feels a little different. It's the stuff that feels different than Game of Thrones has traditionally felt, even as we're like in this world, we're like, oh, there's a little bit of like fun we're having here with the world, and not, it doesn't feel so serious, I guess.
Well, not to mention like edge and dirtiness, and like I said, it's not like the prim proper sort of royal look at some of what we've seen in the past.
Lowbrow.
And, yeah. Which, I think that's what, someone from we're very close to Duncan's POV in this show. And I feel like someone from Flea Bottom, like this is all in keeping with that.
I will also say this is an element, I think, of Martin's writing. Like, this is in there. Not necessarily these in particular moments, but like one of the things that I always found compelling about his writing was his attention to this kind of stuff where like characters are having like the shits and like it becomes a problem. Like, or like, like it's not always played for humor, but sometimes it is. And like, just like the attention to the gritty, less noble, the stuff that you don't normally get in the legends, you don't normally get in the myths, in the stories. Martin gives you that stuff. So I feel like there is like a text precedent for this sort of thing is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and like there's like a relatability factor. I'm not saying, I mean, like everyone's had diarrhea before,
right.
but I'm not saying
it makes them feel human,
this.
right? Like
yeah.
You kind of connect with
and
them.
Mortal, right? Like this is like someone who we can talk about as it goes, but somebody who is an important figure in Westeros history.
Yeah.
And like knowing that like, he's a human too. He's nervous. He's scared. He's got, bodily functions.
He
like
certainly isn't there yet. This is just some dude, low-born. He has a rope for a belt. And he's immediately compelling. And then of course he meets Egg, who is fantastic. And he meets the drunken guy at the bar, who is mysterious. Says he had a dream about him. It's very ominous, right? And then the sweet boy is like, follows him, and we immediately get a sense that like, oh, this is going to be a show about these two characters bouncing off of each other. And I love that he will at first react with like a bit of anger, and like he'll be almost brash, and you can tell that this is kind of maybe what he's used to from Sir Arlen, of the like, boy, I'm gonna hit you across the face, I'll cuff you, I'll give you,
clout
show you the back of my hand, like that kind of stuff. But then he like immediately backs off of it and does something kind of sweet, and like we see this happen so often where like he talks big, he talks like, I'm gonna put you in your place. But then, like, Egg makes eyes at him, and he's just like, all right, get over here, like, and I just love that. It's so endearing because it's like he's like overcoming that part of himself in some ways, but also like he knows there is like some effect. Like he's got it from Sir Arlen, and he knows that like sometimes you need a stern talking to, and he's like, I got to do that too. And I don't know, man. I love that dynamic building, and I love that it shows itself throughout the show as we go. Like this happens time and again, right?
Well, and the idea that like Sir Arlen is all that he has to go off of as a man, as a knight, as everything. So he's like kind of deciding for himself what he thinks is right, what worked, what didn't work, and like he's kind of, in a sense learning those ropes as well. And yeah, it's just like, clearly right away a character that is like righteously good, like down to his core, and like almost like naive in that sense.
Yeah, and then he comes into the tournament. We see this cool set. We see a lot of pieces of it. We see the puppetry, but then we meet Lionel Baratheon. But first off, we meet the Fossaways. Actually, we should also shout them out. Like they're great, especially the younger one. What's his name? Raymond is so cool, and like the way that they connect and kind of bond over like being new, right? Because he's like, oh, he's unseasoned, his like cousin, right? It's Raymond who brings him to Sir Lionel's tent later, and then we meet Sir Lionel, who is the Laughing Storm, and this is a beloved character out of the novella, which we just talked about, or we talked about in our previous episode, and yet, man, what a introduction to this character. He's like, I have something to say. He like gets everybody quiet, and then he just like has this rambling thing that has no real point to it, and then he's like, all right, like that's it. And just like the energy of him is so kind of unhinged, but it's not unhinged. It's like slightly dangerous, but it's not like that unhinged, dangerous, scary. It's more just like unhinged, but like fun. And like you can see why people would want to be around by somebody like this. Like that's the kind of guy you want to go to war with. He also just seems like he is larger than life and can do anything. And people like that are just magnetic to be around, right? And then that all comes to a head in what has to be literally outside of what maybe some stuff that happens in like episode 5. One of my favorite scenes in the entire show is this dance sequence.
It's awesome.
It's so good. And there was a behind the scenes, I think, I can't remember if it was Ira Parker or if it was the director, so I apologize for this, but somebody was saying like, I love dance scenes in movies. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to have one. And I love that that's the reason. Just like I love dance scenes in movies. And like, it's so good. And like, they're right. Like, dance scenes are often incredible. And the way these two characters interact with each other, like, you see so much character being built with like how like kind of stiff and like awkward Dunk is, and then he comes in and he is fucking Jack Sparrow meets Oscar Isaac meets Tyrion Lannister, and oh my god, the just the force of nature he is on the dance floor, and also this like, there's definitely some attraction, it seems like, between the two of them, right? Like they're hinting at maybe a little bit of romantic energy between the two of them. Honestly, I don't know that Dunk is aware of it, but I think at least Lionel may be.
Sure. They're also having like this little battle, like they're kind of stepping on.
Yeah, he starts like trying to step on his toes and
spinning around. But yeah, I like the idea that like dance is kind of like great equalizer. Like everybody's a bit vulnerable. Everybody's like characteristics are being shown by like their movements and stuff. And it's kind of like
it's a way to display confidence and display, so many things. Movement.
This builds into also like, so Dunk is a nobody. He, goes here, drinks a bit, dances with Lionel, and then eventually like is fucking chatting it up with Lionel Baratheon, who's like with
the antler horn crown
on.
Like
they're like buddies already, and like
and this is never confirmed in the show, but Annalisa was like, I bet you that's one of the Storm King crowns that he just like has with him and puts on. But that's like probably one of his ancestral crowns that he just carries around with him. It's ever like confirmed in the show or not. But then I love the idea that Dunk has a crown on from one of the old Storm Kings and doesn't even know it,
It's great. And it's just like excellent world building. This is Dunk on his own. We haven't seen much of Egg, obviously. Like we don't know what his impact is going to be. And so you're just kind of feeling your way into the story. And like you mentioned like Fossaways, and like he's talked to he's like kind of timid in this whole tourney. Like he's walking around trying to talk to people. I think the prostitutes are making fun of him and stuff, but for being a hedge knight and like what that means.
Added scenes, but I felt like were appropriate. Like it kind of made sense.
And then it all like builds to Dondarrion saying, "I don't know him. I don't know Sir Arlen." And then he goes back to the campsite and Egg is there.
Well, it's a lot of him like learning like about Sir Arlen is not maybe the well-known knight that he kind of hoped he was. All these guys are like, I don't know him.
Especially because like that's how Dunk sees Arlen in his mind. Like he so respects him and so thinks he's the most important knight in the Seven Kingdoms.
Yeah.
But and so anyway, we get to the campsite. Egg is there. He's like groomed the horses, caught fish, and is created like being useful.
Yeah. He rode over in the lamb cart or something is what he says, and followed him. Yeah.
And so like and Egg's got these like puppy dog eyes, and he wins him over, and he's he tells him, "I'm Sir Duncan the Tall," and he's like, "I've never heard of you." And he's like, "Have you heard of all the knights?" And he's like, "All the good ones I've heard of."
Yeah, the little quips and stuff are so good.
Dunk being like kind of choosy at first, and then realizing like, well, I mean, I guess he can be my squire, and this little kid being a squire is hilarious.
And the reason he's also being choosy though is I think he's like, I'm so not someone you should want to be a squire for.
Right.
So that I think that's part of it too. Is like, you don't want to be paired with me, man.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And then ultimately, like this really, I love the moment of them laying in under the tree and seeing the star, and how it's like only luck for them because all the other like nobility, they're all under tents and they don't see it. And it's such a cool omen, and like it gets a thought started for me that I want to touch in on, is like this story in the novella and here feels so fated. Like there's so much fate around Duncan the Tall. I want to touch in more as we go throughout, but like this idea of a shooting star that may bring luck, and like what you give to that, obviously, like what you draw from that. But Dunk wants to believe it. Like you see it in his eyes and his reaction, and he wants to believe it. And then going forward, we'll see how that works out for him.
I'm of two minds about it, because on one hand, you're right. Like everything does feel fated, and that's because Martin has this all plotted out in some ways. And also like prophecy and fate is a big part of the Game of Thrones universe, obviously. But on the other hand, I also like it as the element or the sort of very real thing where you can choose moments, and you often don't recognize them when they happen, but there can become moments in your life that can become sort of part of the tapestry of your life, part of the story of your life, and there are like tentpole moments where you're like, this is a very big moment. I didn't realize it at the time, but man, was that a big moment. And it becomes part of who you are. And I think for both of these characters, this is one of those, and they don't necessarily recognize it in the moment, but I just love the idea of like, something really big just happened, even though it seemed small. This is going to be something that I think they're going to remember forever. Obviously, I think this becomes true with what we see he does with his shield, which is a bit of a spoiler for the next episodes, but we're about to move into them, so let's do it.
Yeah, but I'd say like this first episode, it's just so much heart, and this show has so much heart, and like how
immediately wins me over for sure.
Pulls people in, and especially like whether you've seen the other shows, I think this is a good entry point. But if you have seen the other shows or have read the other material,
man, I didn't even think about someone watching this who hasn't seen any Game of Thrones before. That would be a wild experience.
But like I think it holds up.
Absolutely.
I think you can buy in.
I think you totally could.
Yeah.
And what an experience it would be, yeah.
And just like how intimate the storytelling is, we've already talked about it to an extent, but character to character, these moments that are so played up, and they do such a great job of it in the show, versus like there's a little bit of political intrigue, but like the drama around all of Game of Thrones and how like that can feel hard to grasp onto for people like coming to the series. I remember as people came to the show and stuff as time went on, how it would just felt like a lot. And this is like it's just a tournament. Just jump in and see what you think, and it like really takes you on a journey. So episode 2 is called Hard Salt Beef. Dunk eulogizes Arlen to numerous participants at the tournament, though none remembers Arlen serving them. Dunk witnesses the Targaryen princes Baelor, Maekar, and Aerion arriving. Dunk sneaks into Ashford's castle and overhears the two of Maekar's sons, Daeron and Aegon, are missing. He asks the Targaryens to vouch for him. Baelor remembers Arlen and vouches for Dunk, but advises he create his own coat of arms. Dunk and Egg watch Tansel's performance. Infatuated, Dunk asks Tansel if she will paint a new coat of arms on his shield, to which she accepts. Lionel drafts Dunk and Egg to help in a tug-of-war game, which they win. Dunk sells his favorite horse, Sweetfoot, to buy new armor from blacksmith Steely Pate. Dunk and Egg watch the tournament's first jousting matches, and Dunk realizes Arlen has no legacy because he achieved little in life, leaving Dunk despondent that he may end up the same.
A lot of cool moments here, and again, this is the kind of stuff that really works in a smaller scale story where you can focus on stuff like this, because some of the coolest things is Dunk watching the jousting, and I think you can see on his face him realizing like, oh shit, I'm kind of in trouble. He believes in himself enough, and I think he's still going to go through with it because he doesn't really have any other choice at this point. Like, he's like, this is the only shot I got. But as he's watching and he sees Egg, there's the sequence with, I think it's he's a Tyrell, I think he's one of the Lord Tyrell. He gets like dehorsed at one point. Another guy gets knocked off of his horse, and then as the charge is kind of bearing down on him, he jumps on this other horse and then is able to ride by and do this like dip down and he grabs his shield off the ground and picks it back up, and like it's so fast and epic and like nimble. And it cuts to like Duncan watching it, just something being like, "Oh my god!" And like I think that's him realizing like, "Holy shit, these guys are not a joke. They really are amazing at this. I've never really done it before. I've tilted at rings, maybe. You know what I mean? Like it's him realizing like I'm in over my head a little bit. And we mentioned this last week, but this is kind of a Knight's Tale. This is kind of Heath Ledger's A Knight's Tale, but in Martin's world. And this is some of the stuff that I find really compelling, where he's getting that sense and like. We don't get payoff to this really until episode 5, but I love that the story is starting to tell us, like, yeah, you think you're watching this story about a guy who is gonna just be, like, so passionate about being a knight that he's just gonna be incredible at it. And he's gonna be able to just beat these other guys, right? Because they're not as, like, honorable as him. But, like, the show seeding early on that, like, that might not be the show you're watching. Like, that might not be what's gonna happen here. And there is something to be said for, like, skill. And, like, if this is a very real world and, like, these guys have been doing it and winning tournaments and are incredible on horseback, how much do you think this Dunk is going to be able to stand up to them in a straight-up, tilt? Even
if he is a very large, strong
he's a big dude, and he's definitely hardy and, like, tough. So he's got that going for him, for sure.
He's thick as a castle wall.
Yeah,
okay?
Thick as a castle wall, for sure, in more ways than one, he says.
Yeah. So, anyway, he seems like he is in over his head for sure. You see so much of the nervousness, the eyes, the reaction of like how he's seeing, and then obviously like his interaction with Egg. I love when they're watching any of the fighting and the jousting, how they like cheer together and they get so excited.
How excited Egg is for it too. And again, and part of that is just like, I feel like the real enthusiasm of this kid comes across.
Yeah.
As he's just like freaking out. But also it reminds me a little bit of what we talked about with A Knight's Tale, where it's like, this was the Super Bowl for these people, right? Like in your life, this was such a big thing. And so the idea is like, Yeah, they fucking go crazy for this stuff. Like, this is what they
Not
live
to
for.
mention, like, the puppet stuff for a 9-year-old. Like, the puppet stuff is so cool, too. Like, seeing the dragon and the way that's actually fucking created for the show. That's
they were
so
huge.
cool.
That was one thing. It's like, in the book, they're little tiny puppets. Here, it's like giant, maybe stretches credibility a little bit, or credulity a little bit, that, like, you could even make something like this. But the rule of cool, you kind of give it to them, and, like, maybe it could be possible. We're in Game of Thrones, so things aren't.
It's the Dornish puppet masters.
Yeah,
like they're excellent at this stuff. Yeah,
they can make giant, incredible looking dragons that actually breathe fire. Yeah.
Anyway, it's very cool, and it works visually on screen super well, and you can see Egg's excitement through that, and just throughout. I love the sort of like brotherly / fatherly kind of thing that Dunk and Egg are developing, and like it just leads to so much. Even like when they go. And Dunk's clearly in love with Tansel, and like the reaction of Egg just sort of rolling his eyes and like just speaking for him at times, and how much Egg knows and how like precocious and smart he is.
Super precocious,
yeah.
I gotta ask you about a very specific scene though. Start of the episode.
This is we can't not talk about this.
Crude moment of the episode. The giant dick on Sir Arlen. This thing is a hose. I think I saw in the behind the scene that they were talking about it, and they're like, basically the people who worked on Hodor's dick Game of Thrones are like, we're gonna do it again, but this time I want it to be able to piss. And so they're like trying to do it, and then they're like, how much bigger can we go? Like, what's the limit? And they're like, can it be 10 inches long?
Yeah, I love it. I think it's absolutely hilarious, and I think it's like so like I think it's cool because Sir Arlen is like he's a knight in a weird way. His gigantic penis also is something that's like, people don't really know about, that he's got, like, he's keeping this to himself in a sense. And like,
well, he was sharing it with that one woman that
Well, I was gonna say, like, he's clearly a drunk kind of guy. It seems like he likes women and stuff, but this is it's a manifestation of his knighthood. And like, again, the show's very close to Duncan's POV. Maybe this is his like imagination of how manly his Sir Arlen was and everything.
I don't know,
but like ultimately, like I think it works for the beginning of the show. I think it's very funny. The rest of the episode, Arlen's like shown dying. Basically, he's kind of a drunkenly. They're traveling together, and you're like, is this guy even capable? And I'm sure that that's how a Dunk felt throughout his life too. But then you see him when he gets serious in times, and
well, we start getting some hints about like Duncan talking about things that like were promised to him or that Sir Arlen told him, and then we would get a flash to like the moment itself, and it would not line up with what he said. And that's where we first started getting, I mean, like we maybe gotten some of this so far, but we're really starting to get the implication that his memory of what happened is maybe at odds with the reality of it. And also maybe he's exaggerating a little bit, embellishing a little bit about what actually occurred.
I also like the idea of like what you believe though too can still shape, because as we go forward, like what Arlen means to Dunk continues to be more important, and like he believes the best version of Arlen, and he sees that as like something to strive for, and like what we're gonna move forward with these characters into, like as time goes on.
So I'm not sure at what point in the story this is actually brought up, but I think it's pretty present throughout. And this was a question you asked me last week, and I was like, yeah, I think he's a real knight. You asked me like, do you think he's a real knight?
It was a leading question, but
yeah. And I was like kind of thinking about that as we were watching the show. I'm like, maybe they're going to, and like, I just think the show, like, I think it's there. Like, I think it is in the novella. You can read into it and go like, maybe he wasn't knighted by Sir Arlen. And he is lying about it. But I always felt like, Dunk is such a like good character who seems so like he wouldn't lie about that. And I think that's true, but the show definitely leans into, maybe this is revealed in later novellas, I don't know, but it's like, no, we're going to make it more explicit, or at least we're going to hint at it more early on and then make it explicit by the end. This is a thing where he is saying, I was knighted, but we don't know what that actually looked like. Did he say the oath? What was this moment actually like? And we'll kind of continue to revisit this as we go, but I think that does add another element to the Dunk and Egg relationship, where Egg wants to be his squire and calls him Sir Duncan, wants to be the squire to a knight. And if Sir Duncan is not telling the complete truth about being a knight, you can see the added element of like, dude, you don't want to be my squire because I'm not legit. Right. And then that adds this theme that I think is actually fantastic. And I really love that this becomes a central part of the show around what it even means to be a knight. Is it important whether or not you actually say the words and go through the rituals, or is it more important about like what you feel in your heart and how you act, protecting the innocent, that kind of stuff becomes more important. And it's all, I don't know, that's like the open question of this, and it's at the heart of a lot of knight stories, I think, but like the idea that he might not even be a knight becoming so important here, I really love. This is a legendary name in the history of Westeros, and the idea that this guy might not even been a real knight, that says something. That really does.
I think it's always been a fascinating part of this story to me, because it's like, if he wasn't knighted, what does it even mean either way?
Yeah.
Because if he acts like a knight and he serves like a knight and he's more noble than the rest of the knights who are actually truly knighted, then it doesn't matter what you call him. He's still all of the things that a knight should be: noble, chivalrous.
It's just a ritual. It's just a symbol, right?
But the characters in the story would have you believe that is highly important.
Yeah.
Right?
And all knights can make a knight.
Yeah.
We hear about later. So that comes into
he
play.
shouldn't even be able to participate in these games without being a knight. You know what I mean? There's so many other things. It's like elevating your own station.
And in many ways, he is lying. And if you're lying about it, that's pretty bad.
And so again, that's like a conflict maybe within Dunk as we move forward here.
A couple things left in this episode to talk about. Arian's introduced, totally a stuck-up rich kid. He's treating everybody like they're lesser than him. Tells Dunk to like go fetch him stuff. This is right out of the novella. And I just love the look of this character. He's so suave and kind of like he has like a dark fashion to him, and like so sleek. But also just has that sneering lips. I don't know. They do such a good job of casting guys who look like dickheads. And like Finn Bennett seems like a nice dude, but like he can play this dickhead so well. It reminds me of Joffrey. It reminds me of what's her brother's name? Danny's brother's name. Viserys. Yeah. It's like the irredeemable dickhead characters. And you get that sense from him right away. You're like, uh-oh, here we go. We got another one.
Especially because he's got a little madness in him. Like, he's that kind of a Targaryen. But I did like that they noted,
bright
like,
flame, man.
I like that they noted that this is like a different fashion era for the Targaryens too, with like the shorter hair.
Not just the Targaryens. And I love that. He said, like, I like the idea that like Westeros goes through like cycles of fashions. The other way that this became clearly apparent is when we see the Knight's Guard. The King's Guard. When we see the Kingsguard, because they look pretty different than how we've seen them in other eras. This is actually much closer to how they're described in the books, because traditionally we've seen a lot of gold and just like white cloaks, but there's a lot of gold, whereas this was a very white armor, and this is actually how they're described in the books, is to be very white armor. Yeah, very interesting. And then his interaction with him is very cool too. I love how they're like celebrities to him. These are like some of the most legendary knights in the entire realm. I can't believe I'm talking to them.
So cool. And then just an added scene that I thought was so fun. Tug of war scene.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So cool.
Fun.
And again, like, I think it sounds like Dexter Ansel just did this, just like climbed up on it and held on. And they just left it in. And it's so funny.
It looks amazing.
And then I love Lionel, like he's like, oh, you gotta come help me do this. And then he's like, at one point he just stops and walks away. He's so much chaos. I love how much chaos that guy is.
He's excellent, yeah. All right, so episode 3 is called The Squire. Egg trains the warhorse Thunder. While Dunk buys food, Tansel says his shield will be ready that evening. Egg requests to permanently squire for Dunk, but Plumber the steward interrupts them and privately asks Dunk to participate in a rigged joust. During a jousting match, Arian acts dishonorably and mortally wounds a horse, enraging the crowd. A fortune teller predicts that Egg will become king and die in flames. Dunk and Raymond discuss Arian's jousting match, and Raymond expresses his hatred for the Targaryens. Egg watches Tansel's performance of a dragon being slain. Feeling his family was insulted, Arian breaks Tansel's finger, and infuriated Dunk attacks the prince. Guards quickly restrain Dunk as Arian prepares to take revenge, but Egg orders them to stop and reveals that he and Arian are brothers.
Yeah, big reveal at the moment, or at the end here, but let's build up to it. The fortune teller is a very interesting moment. This wasn't in the novella. I saw in the Alt-Shift X that this is the same actor as the innkeeper from the first episode. I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't see that.
So
no.
The innkeeper, this is the same woman. Now, whether or not it's supposed to be the same person, I don't know. But that adds an interesting level of intrigue, right? Like, could it have been the same person? Was she like, like, who is this person?
It's at least causing some sort of confusion in you.
And anyway, she gives two notable prophecies here. Yes, the very notable one about Egg saying he will be king and like die with like worms and like everyone will cheer and stuff. It's like very dark and scares him.
Flame.
And Dunk laughs. He's like, haha, you'll be king, whatever. But also says to Dunk that he's going to be I think he's going to be richer than a Lannister and like some stuff like that, like a very kind of like noble sounding stuff. I can't remember the exact prophecies, but now that we know that, if you know about Game of Thrones, you know that prophecies are very important. Yes, they often play out in ways you don't expect, but they often do play out in some way. Very interesting, and hints at some stuff that is, obviously revealed at the end of this episode.
Yeah, definitely. This was the episode that when we finished it, my wife and I, Caitlin, we went and like rewatched the first 2 episodes as well, just because it's like once that reveal happens at the end of the episode, you want to like see how they threaded it throughout and stuff. And that was really fun. And like rewatching episodes became a repeat thing throughout the season. I kept because they're so short and rewatchable to me.
Rewatchable,
So I rewatched so many of these episodes.
I love that.
I want to start too with like Egg training Thunder, because that was a moment.
That was the moment I was talking about
having
earlier.
Play like here's Sir Duncan like raising the sword and
like
so
twirling
good.
around, and like this is all stuff he like really did, like really practiced, and he wanted to show them that he could do it. And they like asked him like, can you take your shoes off and like run around? He's like, oh, I can totally do that. And he like shoes on. He's running up and down the grass and like
it becomes important too that he like trains Thunder. Like it becomes important in like a later episode.
It's the first time that we kind of deviate and really follow him, which again really helps to define this relationship and how important it is. Because in the novella, it's always Dunk that we're with. I think this is the episode where we get the story where he's sort of thinking about one day I'll marry the second most beautiful daughter and of this lord, and he's like, who marries the first? He's like, well, you of course, Sir Duncan. And like just that whole interaction is added, and it just added another level of just like how much I love these two together.
And can I say one of my favorite lines too that I think was from the previous episode, but it's the moment where Egg asks if he thinks one day he can become a knight, and Dunk is like, yeah, of course you can. You're well enough lad, you can become. And he's like, you really think so? And then Dunk is like, listen, he's like, growing up, people always said that I was stupid. And then it just like silence for a minute, and Egg is like, what? And he's like, and what? And he's like,
I love that.
What did you say when people said you were stupid? And he's like, what business is it of yours? It's excellent, just excellent character interactions.
So good, it's like it feels like he's setting up some sort of profound lesson, and it just leaves it completely open. Yeah, I love that too. Very, very good. So there's another thing that's added here, and this is this whole proposition that happens between the steward, where he comes to Dunk and he offers him this chance to win a fight that he already intends to win. He's like, all you have to do is agree to win this fight that you already want to win, and we'll all bet on you, and we'll make money. I don't know why you even ask him to do this. Couldn't you just have the other guy fall down? I don't know. It's interesting that he even feels like he needs to like clear this with him. But anyway, he does, and Dunk doesn't say no, but definitely strongly implies that he is not into it. Because this would be a cheapening of the moment. He wants to win honorably. He doesn't want to win because the other guy's laying down.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you see that's his streak. Like, why would he want to like sully his reputation already at this point?
But like, it would make a ton of sense for him. Like this would be the thing to do if you're just like a realist, and it's like you would get somebody's armor, which you don't have right now. You would get their gear. It would get your foot in the door. It would make a lot of sense for you to do. You're going to win a fight, which is all we're asking you to do is do the thing you already want to do.
Yeah. And you know what else would make sense is if if Sir Arlen didn't knight you and you decided to lie and get into a tourney because you wanted to be a knight. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like funny where it's like, where will he be honest? Where will he not? And are we conflicted about that? I just think it's such a cool sort of mystery going forward with Dunk and like his honor being tested throughout. Like,
it's a test of his honor for sure. And this is something that was added, and I think it does show a resiliency to like what he does and doesn't think is okay, and that we find respectable. And then we get to the final scene here, which we got to talk about. He's sitting down with one of the Fossaways, with younger Fossaway,
Raymond. Yep.
Raymond, whose I don't know whose name I apparently can't remember.
Who fucking cracks me up when he's talking about Targaryen.
Oh, so good. They're fucking
so
aliens.
Good.
Like, he's so good, He goes on a rant about them that is pretty spot on, honestly.
And it's accurate.
Egg comes running in and is like, he's gonna hurt her. He's gonna hurt the puppeteer. And Dunk has already fallen head over heels for this girl, so he comes charging in like a bull, starts goes into a rage and starts throwing dudes about, grabs Arryn, tosses him like he's a sack of potatoes.
Sack of potatoes.
Yeah, there we go. sack of Targaryen potatoes. And then punches him, kicks him, and then gets grabbed by the guards, and they're gonna like fucking knock his teeth out. And then Egg shows up and reveals he is actually this dude's brother, Aegon Targaryen. Egg is short for Aegon. It's a cool reveal. It's something that I had kind of started to foresee in the book before it was revealed. Obviously, going into the show, I knew it was going to be revealed. We've been playing coy with it, but this is the secret that he's been holding. This is why he knows so much. This is how he knows about all these other knights and stuff, and like why he seems so educated, which you don't necessarily realize, but you're like, something's interesting with this kid, and you're just like, oh, it's because he's like an actual lord. Who is very educated and very smart.
And it's like, it's not the craziest mystery ever. I think there's plenty for you to pick up. Many people probably figured it out before the reveal, but the reveal of it all, and the reveal specifically for Duncan.
They do thread in this mention about the 2 Targaryen boys who are missing. And so definitely if you're like an eagle-eyed viewer, you might start putting 2 and 2 together. Oh, we saw these 2 guys together earlier.
Yeah.
I
also like that the filmmakers chose to focus on like Dunk's like betrayal rather than like this, because again, the reveal was like, it's kind of all there. And like, that was a big moment, obviously, and it's a holy shit moment if you didn't realize it. But Dunk's betrayal in that moment, you're like, he can't believe it. He's trusted this kid, and like seeing what this has done. Yeah. To his worldview, and he really just sacrificed himself to this girl, and all along, Egg put him in that situation to get screwed over in a sense.
This is him basically sacrificing his life,
which Dunk is glad to do. Just he didn't want to be sort of like bamboozled by a Targaryen and look like an idiot.
Well, and also he's defending the weak. This is the thing that he believes a knight should do, and he's going to do it. But yeah, the repercussions of this lead us directly into the next episode, so let's keep it moving.
Yeah. Episode 4 is called 7. Egg hid his identity to become a squire after his brother Daeron refused to participate in the tournament. Baelor informs Dunk that Daeron has accused Dunk of kidnapping Egg. Dunk requests a trial by combat, but Aerion demands a trial by 7. Dunk must find 6 knights to fight beside him in a 7 versus 7 joust. Stefan agrees to fight for Dunk, and Egg says Daeron, Maekar, and 3 Kingsguard will fight for Aerion. Daeron apologizes to Dunk and promises to intentionally fall from his horse. He privately tells Dunk about a prophetic dream of seeing Dunk with a dead dragon. Pate informs Dunk that Tansel has fled Ashford and returned to Dorne, then gives him his shield and armor. As dawn breaks, Egg brings Lionel, Robin, Harding, and Beesbury to fight for Dunk, but Stefan switches sides. Lionel knights Raymond to replace Stefan. Still one knight short, Dunk appeals to the crowd's honor. Baelor declares that he will fight for Dunk.
We've talked about this relationship being core to the show, and we open with Dunk. He's imprisoned, and he is clearly upset with Egg. Egg comes in, and Dunk has this very gruff, I'm disappointed that you lied to me. How dare you do this? You're just a lordling, and you were pretending, and, all this stuff, right? And we see some heartbreaking tears out of Egg here. Definitely, I'm like, how can you be mad at this guy? And then this is that pattern again, because then we see when he speaks to his father in like the next scene, he's like, he's a good boy, like he like kind of goes to bat for him. And that shows that pattern of like being kind of stern, but then softening. So we see Baelor being a good Targaryen here and saying like, what Aerion did was wrong, but in this situation, you've committed a crime against the royal blood, so something's going to have to happen. And this is where he's like, how good of a knight are you? Because I think the only way I foresee out of this is trial by combat.
Yeah, otherwise you're going to lose your hand and your foot, I think, was like the
hand
punishment.
And foot, yeah. For punching and for kicking.
Baelor is like, I wish you had come to me. I wish Egg had come to me because I could have handled this and, that kind of thing. And it just goes to show like, there's some greater lore stuff that I don't think we should get into with like the background of the Blackfire Rebellion and then like what Baelor has done and then leads us to here where Baelor is next in line for the crown. Yep. And he's like possibly going to be from all reports like an excellent king. And I think George has even said he's going to be an excellent king. So it's just interesting to see this character noble of Dornish descent. Like there's so many different elements that you're like, you want this guy, you want this guy to be king. Like you're just looking at all the other Targaryens. You're like, this is our best option. And he's like clearly on Dunk's side. And then by the end of the episode, we already know kind of what the decision is made here. And how about the performance by Finn Bennett when he's like deciding to not do the trial by combat 1v1 and says the trial of 7.
Like,
and
I
like
refuse. And then Maekar's like, you can't refuse. What are you talking about?
Maekar's look of disgust. Yeah. He's like disgusted by his son and like all that
because like you don't get a lot of this, but like I saw this in the Alt Shift X stuff. Maekar is known as the anvil and Baelor's the hammer, and like they are this like fearsome force. Maekar is supposed to just be this like badass fighter, really stern, gruff dude, cold, but like like one of the more fearsome fighters alive, I think, at this point. And so him looking at his son like, you're not going to do this single combat against this Hedge Knight? What are you talking about?
And he's complicating things, right? He's pulling other people's lives at risk.
Yeah.
And that's, that's...
Yeah, he actually views it as cowardly. And this is something I don't think we saw in the novellas. I thought this was a smart addition because it makes sense, right? Like, why wouldn't you just take this one-on-one fight? But he's like, oh, no, my brother was also wronged, and we've got to get him involved too, right? And that's Prince Darren, right? And who Darren the drunkard, who has accused Dunk, right, of kidnapping Egg, essentially. But we all know this is kind of bullshit. He says as much. Dunk says as much. He's like, that couldn't have happened. I had already left at that point. I really liked this sort of tortured, sad Targaryen who is like aware that he is kind of like a useless sack, but like he's tortured by his dreams. Like, this is a guy who's tortured by prophecy. And he drinks to cope with it. I think it's clear.
I think that, and also like, is he coping with this idea of like fighting the urges, the tendencies of the Targaryens, where like they can be pretty fucking bad.
I think it's also just burdened with knowledge.
And so like he's clearly like numbing himself, like kind of removes himself clearly from the fight. He says he's gonna take a fall.
He's like, I'll fall down as soon as you give me one good hit, and I'll lay down.
Yeah, and Dunk, like, you feel how helpless he is when he can't. He's like, how am I gonna find anybody else to fight with me? No one would even say that Sir Arlen was even around and was relevant.
Oh, the betrayal of the older Fossaway here, who has like a fairly like compelling speech about like, fuck the Targaryens. Yeah, I'm for you, and like, he's like, you don't know what this is about. This is where knights are talking now, and like, he's like, we're gonna wake them up and they'll fight like angry, whatever. And like, he's got all this big talk, and then damn, if he doesn't just sell out and show that it's all empty.
I do love the build up too. Like, this is what I was talking about, like getting into some of that epic nature. Like we've gone through some of the ridiculous stuff. Of course, like horses are shitting and there's like pissing and there's all this other stuff, like giant penises. And like now we're building to like, okay, life and death. Like, this is the time for things to get more serious. And
it's so crazy because we just talked about how impressed he was with these like tilts and stuff. And he's about to have a real fight to the death, something that hasn't happened in 100 years, this fight of the Seven. And he's got all the stakes in the world, like his own life and reputation are on the line. He's no longer just doing a tilt. He's fighting to the death, and it's against the Kingsguard and fucking Maekar, Targaryen, and like Aerion, Bright Flame are all riding against him. Like the way that this has come about is so insane. And it's like, I love this. It's like, you never predict this is what's going to happen. It's so cool that it does.
So getting back to some of the prophecy stuff, or like sort of the fate stuff that I was talking about before, with like, there's a few moments throughout this story. The trial of seven is like, we're going to let the seven gods decide whether, that's the idea of like trial by combat too, is the gods.
The idea of trial by combat was a real thing that for a while was done too, like the idea that the god would favor you with victory if your cause was just.
They're like manifesting this idea that like whatever happens here is like supposed to happen, and it's the right thing that happens. And like, it just so happens that like things tend to go Dunk's way, and like that always kind of tends to be the case. So here, where he's totally lost, even with Raymond being knighted, which was so badass by the way, where Lionel steps forward and knights Raymond because of the hesitation of Dunk, because he seems like he's not necessarily either comfortable doing it, or he may have some reservations whether he's like truly a full-on knight.
That's the thing I referenced earlier, where I was like, he shows hesitation here because I think he's like, I'm not the one to be given this. I don't know the words, which he said several times. And so there's this really cool shot that is mirrored between him knighting Raymond Fossaway, and then also Duncan like looking up at Lord Ashford, and there's kind of a moment where he's standing there as if he's getting knighted as well. And so I feel like it's kind of implying that like maybe this is kind of like a dual knighting thing, like here he's also getting knighted in this moment, or at least metaphorically becoming a knight for real now.
This is him like taking those steps. And then the ultimate reveal, obviously one of the most hype moments, that the most excited that I've felt for Game of Thrones in a long time, with Baelor busting through those gates and saying, I will fight for Duncan.
So cool.
After this, wait. after the most impassioned, epic speech by
great
Duncan,
speech.
too.
Yeah.
Just on horseback, back and forth, just pleading with the nobility of Westeros.
Yeah. We got a big fart joke in there just to keep the tone.
Baelor comes through. He says that he'll fight. Maekar's like, "Are you mad? You're fighting. This is for my son."
Fighting
and then
your own family.
We get the Game of Thrones music mixed with like Dunk's theme, and like how like now it's like an earned moment. Like the show has gone from like making a poop joke out of the theme song to now Baelor's here. He represents sort of like the Game of Thrones that we know, and what a reveal that was. It was so cool.
All right, man, I'm chomping at the bit to talk about this next episode, though. Let's do it. Episode 5, penultimate episode, keeping with the tradition of making it an absolute fucking banger in Game of Thrones history.
That is what they do, yeah. So this episode's called In the Name of the Mother. The trial of 7 begins. In the first charge, Aerion knocks Dunk off his horse. In a series of flashbacks to Dunk's childhood, he and his friend Rafe scavenge from a battlefield. They return to Flea Bottom and pocket pick from Alistair, a city watchman. Dunk and Rafe attempt to buy passage to the free cities in Essos, but cannot afford it. Alistair corners them and takes their money. Rafe steals Alistair's dagger, but he notices and slits her throat. Arlen emerges from a tavern and kills Alistair, saving Dunk, who then follows Arlen on his travels. In the present, Dunk duels Aerion on foot until both men collapse from injury. After Dunk falls unconscious, Aerion declares him dead. Egg begs Dunk to get up, and the crowd chants for Dunk as he stands. Dunk and Aerion resume their duel until Dunk gets the upper hand. Aerion yields and withdraws his accusation. In the aftermath, Beesbury and Harding are confirmed as killed. Dunk pledges fealty to Baelor. Raymond and Pate help Baelor remove his helmet, revealing a fatal wound. Baelor collapses from his injuries and dies in Dunk's arms.
What an episode, man. This is the crown jewel of this season, I think. It is the one everyone's going to talk about and has been talking about. I think this is some of the best combat I've ever seen on television, especially, horseback combat. People call it HEMA, that's historically accurate martial arts. It's like the most accurate version of how these people would really fight, at the same time being balanced with wanting to tell a compelling story, wanting to keep it visually exciting and interesting. But man, the disorientation you feel when you're inside the helmet is so powerful. I love the shot where it flies down and then enters like the back of his head, and then it pops crazy right into his POV inside the helmet, which was so cool.
From the first charge, like that was first charge. Cool. And the music, the sound design too, like being so close to Dunk throughout, like when
and if you don't know, these are all real. This is all really done. These are not CGI. These are all real horses, real stunt people. They really did this stuff. It's so crazy.
Collisions are real. Spears breaking, those lances breaking.
Yeah, they touch up some of that stuff with CGI, but like it is the thing. The main things are really happening.
People are like getting pulled by wires off of horses and stuff. Like you can see a lot of that stuff really happening. It's so amazing. And then just to talk, I mean, this episode you talked about it as the crown jewel. Like this is. The combat, the way that the fog is used, the combat, how we're so close to Dunk while he's fighting.
So disorienting. You're like, what is even happening in this fight, And
how dragged out, like knockdown, drag out, it turns into where like you're getting not just, and we talked about this in the novella, so credit to that, he becomes Duncan a flea bottom by the end of this fight. Like there's a fair amount of clashing back and forth, and the choreography it's so amazing to watch, and the way that like flipping around, people falling in the mud, the amount of damage that Duncan takes is absurd. It's insane.
Yeah.
And you're just like, this guy there's no way he can survive all of this. And he just keeps taking damage and he keeps getting up. And I love that repeated usage of like get up from Egg.
Very Rocky moment, right?
And then from Arlen, absolutely very Rocky. And like he just refuses to give up. And I think that's something that Dunk is down to his core. It's amazing. And then it's all like seated in like mirroring his past and seeing why Dunk is Dunk of Flea Bottom, like why he is that character from way back.
So I was talking about how this show is setting you up to think like, on one hand, you're like, oh, this guy's so good, he's going to be able to just like kick ass. And then you're like, oh, maybe not. Like I'm looking at how he's reacting to the skill on display. And I think that pays its dividends in that first charge. We see he gets fucking destroyed. The spear goes right through the shield that we've built up all the way to this point, busts that thing in half, goes right into his side, knocked off his horse in the mud. We're like, did he just die? Like it's like it's so bad, right? And to me, that tells you like this is probably what would have happened to him if he had just had a regular tilt against somebody. He probably would have gotten fucking destroyed because he's not actually good at this, not yet. But the fact that this is a fight to the death, this is a dirty fight that has to do with like grit and like just will at a certain point. Like that stuff all comes into play now in a way that it wouldn't if you were just like doing a tilt, like a regular tilt. This doesn't come into play as much. So it's like you get a bit of both, right? Because like that deflates the whole idea of him just like coming in there and being a force of nature, right? Like he can barely get the horse to start running. That's what you were talking about before, where like Egg has to shout it to get the horse to even move.
Yep.
And then he finally gets it going, and he just gets fucking wrecked. He gets wrecked by Arion. And then they go at it, man, and just an epic fight. There's so many cool things that you see here. The places where they get stabbed, it's like kind of very realistic to like the area, like soft points of armor. The idea of, I love the detail where he stabs Dunk in the leg. I think it's in the leg in one spot, and then he comes in and he stabs in the exact same spot. And that would be exactly what you would want to do, because when you're attacking armor, the hardest part is getting through the links. And so if you attack one spot and you get a puncture, rather than try and hit again and have to start all over again, you go back to that same spot. Now you have a path in. So it totally makes sense. Like there's stuff like that we haven't gotten a lot of. This felt so realistic, and like the way that the helmet saves his life several times but doesn't prevent him from getting damaged. Like he's still getting fucking knocked around. He's so like, I love the way they show how disoriented it is, how little he can see. He finally gets stabbed, and we give him like an excuse to take the helmet off so we can actually see the actor, which is great. But also, I think it makes sense in this moment. The helmet is kind of useless ever in this point. He can't see anything, so he really needs to have it off. But we get a sense for how dangerous this is in this moment to have off. And the whole time they're having this fight, like Raymond Fossaway comes in at different moments and like saves him. Yeah. He's about to get killed, and then like, just crazy stuff going on with like Lionel fighting like Kingsguard in the background. Like Maekar gets dehorsed by his brother. Like go ahead, crazy stuff.
Oh, it's insane. Yeah, and then like at one point like a random lance just like flies in and hits Arion on the back while they're on the ground and stuff. And yeah, it's just like the chaos of all of that, and the fact that like it's all going on. Like it's all there for you to see if you want to watch the scenes in the background. You can figure out.
There are breakdowns where people break down all the stuff that's going on in the background that are cool to watch. Yeah,
that all it shows like like that, like they were like, okay, we're a small scrappy show, but we're gonna fucking do it for this fight. Like we've built up the tourney, we've built up all this trial by combat, that everything that's gonna happen, and like man, did it ever deliver. And like I know there were some people who were probably a little bummed because right away we broke off into a flashback, but it just makes for such a strong like culmination at the end.
Let's talk about that flashback, because I have seen that this is somewhat divisive, just within my circles of people being like, oh, I don't know how I felt about the flashback, or the flashback felt like it kind of took away from the moment. Also, the content of the flashback is good, and I think overall it works, but Rafe is really a character who is a woman, who is introduced, who then immediately dies for the personal growth of our main character. This is a practice known as fridging. We've talked about it before, and this really is what's happening here. It is a little unfortunate. Do I think this would have worked if it had been a man, like a boy instead of a girl? I think it would have worked. You'd be doing less of the fridging trope that happens so often to female characters. But also, I've seen people say that it establishes a little bit of a type maybe for him, because this Rafe character is somewhat similar to the puppeteer woman that he is attracted to later, and so maybe you're establishing a bit of that. But outside of that one, to me, that's like a note that I do have to acknowledge, because I think it is true that we have a character who basically gets fridged here. That doesn't mean that it's not effective and that it's not a cool story overall. And like seeing Sir Arlen come in and do his like drunken master fighting is very cool. He's literally vomiting. I love that he goes to draw his sword. He's like hitting it on the wall, and he's just like he's all out of sorts. And yet he's quite deadly. He's very effective. You can see this is a guy who is trained in some ways. And such a fascinating character. Like, I hope we end up getting more flashbacks with him in the future, because I'm so interested in Sir Arlen Pennytree now. I really want to know more about him.
I would love to. Yeah, there's a couple other things I'd like to talk about with him in the last episode, but great character.
What were your thoughts on the flashback as a whole?
When it first happened, I kind of was like, there's no way they're doing a flashback right now. As we've built up, because again, I'm talking about like how amped I was for episode 5. Like I couldn't wait, and I was like so excited for it in every way. And then like we start it and like 5 minutes in, we're in a flashback and I'm like, all right, let's see what they got. This better be a good flashback. And ultimately I felt it was a good flashback. I felt like there was a lot of good world building that went on. A lot of like him with Arlen too, as they like journeyed.
That's
and
all really cool. Him following him and
how he'll never give up. He was going to die, just because he wanted to follow Sir Arlen, and eventually Sir Arlen came back and was like, get up, and how that all ties back together. I did read Ira Parker talk about the flashbacks. So he said it's always a tricky thing to do flashbacks. I personally hate them because they tend to kill the momentum. So obviously the flashbacks we did early on in the season were quick little pops. This is the first extended one, which hopefully at episode 5 has earned its place. Look, if you look at episodes 1 and 2, and even most of 3, a lot of that is just setting the table. It's getting to know the people involved. We're not ripping through a lot of plot on our show. It's a little slow. We're just enjoying ourselves in Westeros at first, but all of that stuff really pays dividends as you land in episodes 4 and beyond. So, kind of saying, hey, I know that like it sucks to have to do a flashback here, but like it's narratively important and it will bring more impact for the final bit. And I tend to like agree with that. I think once I watched the episode all the way in its entirety, I was like, that all really worked for me. Like that all came.
I think it works, and it sets up the moment, and it like adds weight to the get up moment, and like shows everything that brought him here, shows his background at Flea Bottom, like you said, shows Duncan from Flea Bottom and his ability to be scrappy and not give up, which comes into play as he ultimately wins this fight, and forces Arian to concede, which, by the way, people have broken down what's going on in the background, and they think the fatal blow gets landed after Arian has actually conceded, and yet he like no one heard him. And so before he can like officially concede and they can call it off, like that's when the fatal blow lands.
Yep, it's unfortunate and sad and very Game of Thrones that it happens that way. But yeah, I went back again. I watched these episodes multiple times, so that does happen. That's a fact. I guess I want to talk about like the close POV too, of like how they did all of the stuff with Duncan. Like I mentioned the sound design, but like when it goes sort of distant and it's like he falls over and seemingly dies for a moment, which again, like it's almost like prophecy or fate brought him back in this moment, that the gods deemed it was possible. It was prudent for Duncan the Tall to live here.
There is something to this whole idea of trial by combat. Maybe the gods do favor the just.
Yeah. So he literally stops breathing and he's laying there, and there's this moment of like, holy shit, and the damage that he's taken, you're like, yeah, he should be dead. And then ultimately like takes a breath and has that get up from Egg, and then also Sir Arlen.
Oh man, when he screams wait.
Oh my god. It is so good. And it's like the kid is just incredible. I just like the energy the like that's coming off of him in those scenes, and like how much passion there was in that scream and everything. It's just like it's perfect, and it would pull Dunk back out of it. It seemed. One other thing too, like I saw from the book, someone brought this up online, so I won't take credit for it, but there is like in the book, there's a few people because again, this is like he becomes like a common or hero. Dunk does like the crowd kind of turns on the Targaryens throughout because of Aerian's actions and some other stuff. Right. And I think Baelor knows this, and that's why Baelor's trying to balance the scales in a sense as well. And but like there's this moment in the book where like all of these commoners are like talking to Dunk or like touching him or this or that, and some people have said that like this may have been this quote unquote 7, the mother, the father.
Oh, interesting. Like they all represent each of the 7 gods or whatever.
Right. The maid, the smith, like all the stranger, there's all these different gods. And like, so there's like a maiden who kisses him, an old man who shakes his hand, a tattered robed man who blesses his sword. Like there's all this stuff. Again, if you want to dig into this and think that there could be some sort of like godly fate sort of stuff happening here.
That's fun.
Like you can dig into that. And I think the show does a good job of representing that in that Alt Shift X video. I believe there's this shot from above of all of the warriors on Dunk's team that are all like listening to Baelor right at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And it kind of looks like that symbol. It's a bird's eye shot, and it looks like the symbol of the 7 that we've seen countless times throughout Game of Thrones. And like, there's maybe some like mysticism or spiritual stuff happening here. So that's like, I like that the show obviously doesn't get into a lot of that stuff, but I like that it's there for those who want to dig into it. And then we have this like really tragic scene that we knew was coming because of the book. Baelor, in this very noble act, chose to represent and fight for Duncan, using his son's armor, Valar's armor, and it seems that Maekar got that last second blow in, like we said, and then just what did you think of how that was depicted?
I loved it, man. I felt like it was going to be maybe a little grosser, but I'm actually glad it wasn't, and I think they talked about it, and like they actually showed they had this like brain, like exposed brain. I felt like it was gross and effective, but they didn't linger on it. And I think it was Ira Parker talking about how making it too gross would distract from the tragedy of the moment and make it more visceral and sort of body-based. And instead, he wanted you to be thinking about, maybe this is director, I don't want to misattribute, but wanted you to be thinking about the tragedy of this moment and the sadness and the way it's affecting the characters emotionally. And if you focus too much on the gore, you can lose some of that. And I thought that was like, it actually showed a smart way to like show a little bit of restraint there when you could have gone really hard at it.
Yeah, lighter touch. I mean, it is just so tragic. So much spins off of this. It's so reminiscent of like, you know, one of the final episodes of Game of Thrones where a very noble character, I guess spoilers, I won't say who it is, but a very noble character dies. That's just like, you can't imagine the show going on without a character like that.
One of the final episodes of which season?
Of season 1.
Gotcha. Okay, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. And like, you're just, you know, this character goes down and you're like, what could have been, right? This truly noble king.
Well, let's get into the ramifications of this final moment, because that's what episode 6 is going to be all about.
Episode 6 is called The Morrow. Lionel invites Dunk to move to Storm's End, but Dunk believes that he brings only bad luck. Dunk finds Valar, who questions why his father died, but Dunk was left alive. Maekar informs Dunk that Arion will spend time in the Free Cities to atone. He laments that Baelor would have been a good king and invites Dunk to live in Summerhall, where Egg can be his squire. Dunk declines, which Egg overhears. In a flashback, Dunk asks Arlen why he was never knighted. In the present, Darien tells Dunk that he should mentor Egg to prevent him from becoming like Arion. Egg takes a knife to Arion's bedroom, but Maekar calms him. Dunk asks Maekar if Egg can squire for him on the road, which Maekar refuses. As Dunk leaves Ashford, Egg arrives and they depart together. Egg suggests they travel to Dorne. An angry Maekar later realizes that Egg is gone.
One of the funniest scenes in the entire show is this first opening scene to this episode with Lionel and this maester.
The maester? Oh my God.
The maester's so like, I'm sorry. His wounds are beyond my ability. And he's like, an itchy asshole is beyond your ability to heal. Get out of here. And then he's like, I'm going to die.
Like, fuck off, you witch. And he pushes him away.
And he's like, don't listen to him. He's a terrible maester. It's so funny. He's like, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Which ends up being true too, so it's just hilarious. And like, we want him to go with Lionel, right? We're like, oh, I'll go with Lionel, but like Lionel, I think the thing that changes his mind is Lionel is like, fuck the Targaryens. And he's like, basically, you know, don't feel any sympathy for them.
He just can't get on board with Egg being terrible.
Not only that, yeah, he loves Egg, who's a Targaryen, but also like he does recognize the sacrifice that Baelor made, and he can't get that fully on board with that.
And Lionel had a good argument, though. Lionel did say, look, he had nothing to lose. There's a bunch of white cloaks and people who can't fucking hurt him. And we actually were risking something there. We fought for you.
Totally.
And it's a great point.
It's a great point.
Their relationship going forward, too. Like, I love the, like, I'll love you like a brother if you come with me, or I'll hate you like a brother if you don't. Like, all that kind of stuff is just, like, so good. And like, you wish so badly that he went with Lionel.
This is the thing that, like, I know you've read, so don't reveal, but, like, I'm so curious to know if Lionel Baratheon comes back at any point, because I'm like, he's such a good character. I'm going to be so sad if this is the last we see of him. Come on.
Yeah. A lot of these actors too. It's like, hopefully a lot of, you know, we see a lot more of, like, you know, can you imagine not seeing Raymond anymore, or Maekar, or a lot of these other characters again? Like, that would
even Arion, the shithead. Yeah. Like, I want to see how this changes him. You know.
We got to talk about this stuff with Sir Arlen of Pennytree, and because I thought this is such a cool change that added so much to Sir Arlen. This idea of, like, there's the Pennytree in town where they nail pennies when they leave and they pull them off when they get back.
I think this is drawing on existing lore that just wasn't in the novella, or we didn't get outlined in the novella, but this is actual Martin lore.
I think
from,
that's
like,
true.
Ice and Fire, I think, or the Fire and Blood book, I think, maybe. I don't know where it comes from, but this is supposedly true lore, I believe.
I've heard that that's true, and it's cool that, like, Arlen of Pennytree, like, you pull your coin off when you return, but there's no places to put coins on the tree anymore, because you just think of that, like, you know, that loss of all of those young people.
Yeah.
What Sir Arlen represents, and what the penny represents, and what, like, being noble represents, and all the things that, like, all come together in this final episode. I heard Peter Claffey talk about this, and I think he really understands the character. I thought this was so cool. This is in the behind the scenes. You probably saw it as well, but he says, Sir Arlen was definitely good enough to have served a lord. And Dunk, after seeing all these so-called knights at the tourney, realizes now why he lived the way he did. All this glory and luxury the Highborns live in is complete horseshit. To be a knight is about being true to the principles that you live and set upon yourself. Dunk realizes after speaking to Darren, there's a little kid who looks up to him and now has the opportunity to raise a Targaryen by the way Sir Arlen taught him.
Yeah.
And like, I think there's so much built into that too. And this idea that like at the end, when there's the fake out that he possibly dies and then comes back and says, a knight always finishes his story. Mm-hmm. I thought that was such a cool full circle. He finished the story within the flashback, but also telling Duncan, finish your story. Whatever you want your story to be, you don't need permission to be knighted. Because he asks him specifically, why wasn't I knighted? And then there's this big pause.
Never
and
answers.
Then he says,
we don't know.
A
we also don't know for sure. It's not confirmed that he never knights
because he doesn't die on screen. Arlen doesn't die on screen. So he could be knighted after that. So there's some ambiguity of whether he was knighted or not.
And I don't know if we'll ever know. And I think I like the ambiguity of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think Sir Arlen's a really fascinating character. That's why I was saying I hope we find out more about him. Yeah, I like all of that stuff. You know, he's got an interesting energy too, as he just like shrugs and just kind of looks kind of coy in his like imaginings of him. That's kind of fun. But then, yeah, we got to talk about Darren the drunkard shows up at this Beesbury funeral, which is crazy. They have like this coffin of bees. Wild.
So wild. Very
eagle-eyed viewers, by the way, on like Threads or something I saw had posted there's a screen cap where you can see the Kingsguard who killed him is at the funeral. And I thought that was actually a really cool detail because it's like the Kingsguard were just commanded to fight in this fight. It's not like they like wanted to. And so like he probably does feel bad. He's like he probably, you know, these are fairly honorable knights from everything we've heard, and he's probably like, this guy fought well. Like, I'm sorry I killed him, and I'm gonna go to his funeral. So I thought that was a cool detail. Even though the show doesn't show us this really. It's in the background, and we don't highlight it really at all. But yeah, anyway, Darren shows up, and I just really found this guy compelling, and I love this this thing he talks about where it's like, yeah, I don't know how he's going to turn out, you know, like Arion used to be, you know, like a good kid too, and you know, look what happened to him, and like. I think this is really compelling to Dunk, who had previously kind of turned down. We kind of skipped over it, but he talked to Maekar and was like, "I'm done with princes. I'm not going to take them on. I'm not going to go to Summerhall."
It's another opportunity where you're like, you can just envision the future where he does go and finish his training and,
like, we'll train
Squire's egg and
But the reality is that what you touched on earlier and what Peter Claffey talked about. The novella is called a Hedge Knight. Sir Duncan's a Hedge Knight. And like this is him realizing that that's what he wants to be, and that's what he's going to lean into.
So Valar, Dunk goes to talk to him, and there's this conversation where basically it's like, what was all this for? So why did the gods deem it was necessary to keep Dunk around and kill one of possibly the greatest kings Westeros has ever seen? And like this idea of like, what was it for? It better have been worth it. It's the kind of the idea that I think you get going forward. And like Maekar kind of says some of this stuff as well.
Yeah.
Like,
he's like, maybe they'll need my hand one day. Yeah.
My hand and my foot. Like, what does that look like when the kingdom
likely
may need it more than they needed that Targaryen king, that great Targaryen king. So I just think that's like, again, threading some things that add such gravitas to the story for me that just give me fucking goosebumps thinking about like how, you know, someone like Baelor that like you would love to see the future of, and like what
even not
now.
Knowing the future, you can kind of make arguments for that already, because like, does the legacy of the Targaryens not go in as in the shitter as it needs to in order to make what happens later happen? You know what I mean? So like you can already start to piece together the reasons why maybe this was important to happen.
Or maybe it was better if it didn't happen. You know, there's just like, again, maybe the gods are cruel, as they tend to say in Game of Thrones, and this is all...
And unknowable, which is so often the case, right, in these books. Yeah, I guess finally, Egg showing up, and I think we're all so happy that I wasn't even like doubting it. And it's a little different in the novella, but like I was just like, oh hell yeah, he's gonna join him, right? And he joins up with them, and they ride off into the sunset essentially. And you know, he does the whole thing where he talks about the 9 kingdoms instead of the 7.
You want to do the actually thing? We have to. So 7 kingdoms because the Riverlands and the Crownlands were never kingdoms. There's 7 kingdoms because those were what were united, including Dorne, to create, you know, during Aegon's conquests, and eventually, well, I guess Aegon's conquest didn't even actually technically get Dorne, but he claimed Dorne. So 7 kingdoms is what it is, but I think it's hilarious that Egg is like, oh, it's 9 kingdoms, and then ultimately like he's just kind of saying because there's 9 different areas in Westeros.
Yeah, that all have like sort of like they're almost like little states within
distinct areas.
Distinct areas, yeah. Anyway, funny part, but they decide they're gonna go. They mentioned going to Dorne, I think, for the puppet shows, and it sounds like maybe that's where the puppeteer went. So we get the implication that's what they're doing. But then we get this shot where they're writing, and we see Sir Arlen peel off. He's there, and he peels off and goes to the side, and kind of lets them go on their own. And it's sort of a cool kind of passing on of his legacy moment.
Well, I love that he's traveling. He's with them, right? No matter what, like he's traveling with them. He's sending them on their way. It's all been,
But then he leaves because he's like, my work here is done. And then yeah, man. We get the final reveal at the very end that Egg did not clear this with Maekar. Maekar's like, where the fuck's my son? So that's an oh shit moment for next season, I think, is we're like, what? How is this going to play out in the new season? Is Maekar gonna come after them? Is he going to be a hunted man now? Are they going to be fugitives from the Targaryens? I don't know.
It's interesting because I saw a bit of controversy around this because it is a change from the book. In the book, he gets permission and like is sent on his way because ultimately we see, and there's a scene here where it kind of backs it up, like there's a possibility that Egg sticks around with his family and turns to the madness of the Targaryens in a sense. And he goes in and almost tries to kill his brother, Aerion, and if not for Maekar stopping him. Like there's a little bit of that madness that you can see brewing in Egg possibly. And then so he gets permission in the book. He doesn't get permission here. This is a controversial thing because like Darren accused Dunk of kidnapping a prince. Now he's actually kidnapped a prince. He just went through the trial of 7, all of that basically also because of that. They've changed the story and people are, I feel honestly that it'll be addressed and Ira Parker has said as much that like it'll quickly be addressed.
I don't think you make that change if you don't have a plan for how to address it.
Yeah, and ultimately part of me thinks that it's because they want to keep the actor for Maekar around and relevant because he's gonna come back to play a major
also
part.
You could see like Maekar, once he realizes what happened, he might end up being okay with it ultimately.
Right.
Overall thoughts on the franchise going forward, very briefly, I'm excited about it. I think this show is a breath of fresh air. I think it is going to be something that's going to bring a lot of attention back to this world, and I hope for the best for it. It makes me really excited to watch the next season of House of the Dragon. I'm feeling more excited about the Game of Thrones universe and Westeros and A Song of Ice and Fire than I have in many years. So
I think many people are feeling that way too. I think that's at first when the show was coming out, it was very quietly, like the first, 2 or 3 episodes, not many people were talking about it, and it built to a fever pitch. I saw that like the show was one of the most watched series for its like debut series on HBO ever.
Wow.
I think it's like top 3 ever for a first season. I saw that like the graphic novels shot up to like the top 3 purchased novels like on different like book buying services and stuff. So
we'll have a copy in our bookshop, by the way, if you'd like to buy one.
Yeah, so people are, I think, getting re-engaged, reignited. It's exciting times. I'm so excited for more of this. My excitement for this series is about as high as it's been since like, season 4 or 5 of Game of Thrones.
Bookshop, by the way, link in the show notes. Very excited for it. Book versus show. That's the thing we got to choose here. Where ultimately do you land on this one? Did you like the book or the show better?
So for me, it's kind of a push nearly in this scenario because I so much enjoyed getting back to George's work and reading his words, and I so appreciate it, and it's been one of my favorite stories that he's written for a long time, and going back I was just reaffirmed. And then getting into the show, I just think they did things and expanded, and because George is so close to it, I'm taking the show in this case. They're just expanding in really smart ways. They're really staying true to the nature of the story. They understand the characters. They're doing things for the right reasons. I think this show is like a, for me, as far as a Duncan Egg, like Hedge Knight adaptation, this is like a near perfect adaptation.
Yeah. Fantastic adaptation. This is like one of the things that you dream for as an author, I think. This is an adaptation like this. I think it's incredible. And because of that, I'm going to take the show as well. And, I say that as a massive fan of Martin's writing, full acknowledgement that this doesn't exist without it. But this really feels like the perfect storm coming together and making something really special. And I want to highlight that by giving it credit here and say that I think it is the best version of this story to date. I love it, man. I'm so excited. I'm going to read on, like I said, I'm going to read on the next novellas. I'm so excited for future seasons, and we will be back to cover those guaranteed when they happen in the future. So Stay tuned to that. Sounds like we're giving it to the show overall. If you enjoyed our coverage of Night of the Seven Kingdoms, please let us know in the form of a rating and review on whatever app you chose to listen on. If you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to our channel, like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you, engage with you, and we'd love to hear like how you feel like this stacks up to other Game of Thrones shows. If you read the novella, how it stacks up to that.
Yeah, and be sure to connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, all of those at Ink2Film.
We also have a Discord channel, which we have been developing even further this year. There will be a link to that in the show notes. That's where you're going to give us suggestions on future projects, interact with our community, have dedicated spots to talk about each of these projects. So even if you listen to this episode like years from now, there should be a dedicated channel in there to chat about it still. And you can join the conversation at any point. So we'd love to have you join us over on Discord.
And thank you to Ross Bugden for the use of our intro and outro music.
All right, man, that's going to be it for this week. The only thing we have left to do is to announce our next project. This is a quarterly poll, the first quarterly poll of 2026, voted on by our patrons. So again, if you'd like to vote, patreon.com/Ink2Film. It is going to be the, I think it's like 96, thereabouts, Romeo and Juliet, the one that's like in modern day with Shakespearean language. We got DiCaprio's in it. It's a movie that I saw, I think, in the theater when it came out in the 90s, and I haven't seen since. So excited to revisit it.
Yeah, that's the Baz Luhrmann film from 1996. So definitely
right.
early Leo. It'll be interesting to get into that. Back to Shakespeare.
Yeah, really. Next week we'll just be reading Romeo and Juliet, which I haven't read since I was in high school. So
Same.
Yeah, back to Shakespeare. That was what won the poll. So looking forward to that, man. That's gonna be it. And we'll be back one day to Westeros, but not for a little while. So until next time,
keep adapting.